Everybody joining me this week on the show is Josh Neighbors. You can check him out over on the Neighborhood Watch. I really like that name of a show. It's a great name, covering all things Big 12 over there. Producer over at 103.7 The Buzz. That's in Little Rock, Arkansas. So, Josh, I appreciate you coming on the show and talking some Big 12 and college football with us.
Yeah, man, it's 1 foot in the SEC, 1 foot in the Big 12 for me. Going to Missouri and then immediately covering the Big 12 for Sirius XM, and then also, yeah, still doing the Big 12 stuff, but also now in Arkansas. So I've got 1 foot in both worlds right now, which actually feels pretty relevant today, considering the announcement the SEC is going down to Dallas for media days.
Yeah, they're going all. There's going to be like the Super Bowl. So I had an Auburn guy on last week, and you talk about going to Missouri. It sounds like they're going. SEC would go to every state that has a team.
Right.
Where should they go if they go to the state of Missouri?
Well, they did the basketball tournament a few years ago in St. Louis, which I think did make a lot of sense. Just to kind of basketball is something with the SEC that it's big. Obviously certain fan bases, and they should move it. But I think Dallas might be a spot they might go for that because that's the Big 12 is locked in there for football until 2030 at least. So getting that game there obviously is a conflict, and I'm not sure how long their football contract is with the new George Dome. I guess I'll call it Mercedes Benz. But yeah, I mean, maybe they try baseball, right? Maybe they try getting down to Texas with something else. But I think media days is a good start because you got A&M, you got Texas, you got Oklahoma with a massive contingent, you got Arkansas with a large contingent, LSU's got a big contingent in Dallas too. So it just kind of makes sense. They've got a whole lot of folks in that area. And the SEC, it doesn't have to be a national conference like the Big 12, but I think obviously making inroads, expanding their footprint, right? They are kind of now Midwest and now Texas as well. That's become part of the Southeast for them.
Yeah, I think the days of Birmingham only having it is probably over
Thank
there.
God. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess for me though, since I'm in Alabama, I was hoping if I ever got credentialed to cover, okay, that's in Birmingham.
That is true, but I do think people like the ability now to go to Nashville, go to obviously Dallas, and look, they are easier to get because a lot of the SEC schools are in smaller towns, right? So the
Mhm.
airports you're having to fly to a hub, and now Nashville kind of is a bit more of a hub, and also DFW definitely a hub, right? So it's maybe a bit more of a one stop shop for some of the folks who are traveling.
Yeah, absolutely. But I did not expect for us to go into SEC days when I asked you all. But hey, like you said, your foot's kind of in both of them with the
Right.
show, the Big 12, and then there in Arkansas too as well. Big 12 media days. Now you had a cool thing going on first. The mascot still displayed in that.
Yes.
You were chatting it up with all the mascots there at Big 12 media days.
Yeah, so I found Nitro, the UCF Knights mascot, and I took a picture with him. I actually didn't want the cheerleaders in it. The cheerleaders were in it, and I did not like because it felt too fanny at that point. I just wanted Nitro, and I
Yeah.
thought the good bit would be, I said I was chief of mascot content, which was something I completely made up. That was not the case. I just kind of made that up. But I thought it was fun to like take a picture of all the mascots because they're photo ops and whatnot. And it's good to see them mess around and whatnot. So it was especially good to see the new ones. It was cool to have obviously the Houston Cougar and the BYU Cougar. There, Cincinnati had their Bearcat there, and then Nitro too, and it was good to see them, and then all the mascots interact, and then got to do when the Sooner come over, and I got to sit down and put a mic in his face and say exit interview and stuff. So it's nice they have the mascots there. But I'll tell you what, it was all part of the production. And the Big 12, I think they've basically said no matter what happens, they're going to make sure all the production that they do is still going to feel big. Like they do not want to feel like they're going to be taking a step back. They're going to do on the field in Jerry World, big stage, like literally big stage, right? Championship trophies there. No matter who is there, they want it to feel big and like an event. Brett Yormark gets that a lot, I think. So it was a very big, very well run event, in my opinion.
Yeah, I got on a spot they showed there in Brett Yarmark's
Yes.
presentation. There's a line at the end. I'm going to hold off, but I'm going to ask you on something that was said in that one. I really caught my attention. I know they played it twice, but I hit the backspace on YouTube to hear it, multiple times, make
Right.
sure I was listening right. But overall, just people out there, and they look we know it. I'm in Alabama. I'm in SEC
Mhm.
country. People know what that is. But what is covering and being there at Big 12 media days like?
Yeah, it's a bit of a different experience because these well, especially with the transition right now, because there's so much excitement with the new schools. And Oklahoma and Texas really just did their own thing. I mean, they hit their media and they were out. They were not staying around very long. And I don't know if Big 12 media, I don't think there was a big desire to get them on in some senses. And I don't think they were really willing to put their people out there. They just kind of wanted to do their thing and go and move on. But it's this interesting intersection because, and Brett Yormark was even asked about it. Like Oklahoma and Texas, you cannot deny the success and the value they've brought to the conference, but also too, like they've added 4 new upstart schools. And really the last few years, the way the conference has broken, especially in football, it's not been defined by those schools.
Mhm.
It's been very much defined in the last at least 2 years. Right? Oklahoma had a really amazing stretch, but obviously they're in transition right now. Texas is trying to climb back, and it looks like they might this year. But really, the schools doing the damage. It's been Oklahoma State and Kansas State and TCU and Baylor, and so it's good to have those schools. And the funny thing is, though, like you're talking about Oklahoma State, Baylor, like a lot of questions are being asked of Dave Aranda and of Mike Gundy. I think that's the one thing about this is the cyclical nature of this league. Like the coaching jobs are challenging in the SEC because the demands that are put on them. The challenges in the Big 12 are much more team building and
Mhm.
roster building and manage. Like you have to manage everything. You have to manage roster building. You have to manage like where you are recruiting. You have to fight against those big schools as well too, but also you offer more playing time. How do you get those kids in? What's your NIL look like? Right. Texas Tech has done a very good job. Their NIL is, better than some SEC schools. But nobody has an infinite war chest like Texas A&M, like a Tennessee is displayed as of late. So you have to work through all of those things. And I think there's an awesome group of coaches in the Big 12. I think there is an argument to be made, like the depth of coaching in the Big 12 is just as good as you'll find. I know it sounds like a homerish, but like Lance Leipold is an awesome football coach,
Mhm.
an awesome football coach. He is at Kansas. Chris Kleiman is a really good football coach, Kansas State, right? I mean, if you were to rank the Big 12 coaches and take Texas no-use coach, where are you putting Steve Sarkisian and Brent Venables? Like they're not towards the top of the list. And you bring in Gus Malzahn, who like we all know, and I don't think Auburn even should have fired Gus Malzahn. I'm a huge Gus Malzahn guy. But like, he's being added to the league at UCF, and that's a really interesting wrinkle too. So the coaching jobs are a bit different, and I think more difficult in some like hands-on ways that are not fan demands. Um, the and obviously I think the characters they have are they had a really eclectic group, I think is the way to put this, because they've got something different really at every single school.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at the teams too, Oklahoma and Texas. I'm not saying it's easy to win at big schools, but it should be easier to win there.
Right.
You're mentioning coaches that are winning at schools that traditionally are not have been at that level. And I mean, look at TCU last year. I mean, yeah, they've had some good years, but getting to the national championship. Baylor, what Dave Aranda has done, he took. I mean, I know that again, a team that had gotten to certain heights, he took them further. I mean, here Texas Tech. I mean, there's a lot of excitement around Texas Tech, Kansas State. I mean, I feel like they've kind of taken a little bit if they continue what they did last year. I mean, what Bill Snyder did, now they're adding on to that. I mean, so these coaches are really good. These are places that traditionally maybe have not recruited like in Oklahoma, Texas, but these coaches, like I said, they're team building. They're finding the right players, and it's about the pure coaching and being able to out coach the other guys. And they've got a plenty of coaches that have done that.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Campbell's a great example. People are like, "Oh, Matt Campbell lost his touch." Like their defense was amazing last year. Their defense was outside the TCU game was a fantastic defense, and their offense was just awful. That's kind of what defined their season. But you go and you look, and they actually broke their streak against Iowa last year, and they out Iowa'd Iowa in that game. And like it was unbelievable to watch. They manufactured this unbelievable 99-yard touchdown drive. But they should have beaten Texas last year too. Xavier Hutchinson dropping a ball. Basically, would have walked into the end zone was extremely strange to see from a guy who was, as good as he was. But like you think about all of this coaching cast and their highs and their lows, and some of the lows have to deal with where they are, right? I think a good example of that is Matt Campbell. But like you look at the quarterbacks they're bringing. I mean, Hunter Deckers and JJ Cole are 2 really good quarterbacks, and they're following a guy in Brock Purdy who we just saw, like, I know you could say it's easy, but there are a lot of guys who have been plugged into pretty good situations in the NFL and just has not worked out. And Brock Purdy was awesome. I mean,
Mhm.
An injury slowed him down in the end of the day. Not
Mhm.
actually his quality of play is what slowed him down in the end. So, Breece Hall, I mean, once again, the guy got hurt, but like, oh my God, he was awesome for the Jets and no surprise at all. So you're seeing guys like Matt Campbell, right? They're facing challenges. How do you kind of keep growing, keep getting better? Because I think the one thing you learn here is like program building is not linear, winning is not linear, right?
Mhm.
Kansas won 6 games last year, but if Kansas wins 4 or 5 this year, you're going to say they're taking a step back, because if you asked a Kansas fan last year, hey, over the next 2 years, would you take 10 wins, total? They'd be like, oh my God, of course we take 10 wins total. Right. So it's funny because, I think sometimes people think that winning is like this straight upward, 45-degree angle line. And for maybe Texas, it could be, but for a lot of these schools, it's not, it's ups and downs. And how do you kind of, find that groove and rhythm? And I think K-State might be close to doing it. I think TCU's got a pretty good shot. We'll have to see how they follow up last year. But I thought I said the same thing about Oklahoma State and Baylor, and they went 6-6 last year, and facing a lot of questions this year. So there is a much more up and down nature, and the coaching is you have to be very, very reflective on a year-to-year basis about what you're doing if you're sure it's the right thing. And some coaches do think it is, and some coaches are like, no, I have to change some stuff. So that's always interesting to see.
And it's like you said, and I think fans don't want to hear this, but I think a lot of coaches may agree with this. Sometimes with a team, you may have to take a step back one year
Right.
to take 2 steps forward for the following year. So it is all about it. But fans get spoiled easy. They get spoiled easy, like you said with Kansas. Now they ain't gonna expect the bowl game every year now.
Right.
When you do
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Oh
I mean, of course, they're going to want it badly, but it's like, think about where you were, think about where
yeah.
you are now, and, understand, hey, it was nice, but, it might take a little more time in between.
And I'll say one thing real quickly. You mentioned Gus Malzahn there. I will say this: as a guy that writes about Auburn, and I know how Auburn fans are, after what they experienced for a year and a half under Brian Harsin, they probably wish Gus Malzahn had never
Right.
been fired. So, anyways, that is a different segment for a different day on that one. But Brett, before we jump into where the media picked the Big 12 and kind of couple these teams real quickly, Brett Yarmark, year one
Yeah.
as commissioner. I know last year he made waves saying we're open for business. He said, and look, the 4 teams are coming in. Just how would you grade him year one as commissioner of the Big 12?
You have to give him an A+ because of where the league, like, here's the thing. He understands that perception is reality. It's so funny. He is not a football fan, like outright not a football fan. During his speech that he gave, he was like, after 1 year, I'm hooked. And it was like, so convincing, Brett. Thank you. He is a number one. He's a basketball guy. You can tell he's a hoop head. He loves basketball. If you were to pick a sport like that, that would be it. But he looks at the Big 12 as a product. And I think he understands the Big 12 is not the SEC. They're not the Big 10. So how do you make it something else, something different? Now, obviously, on-field success defines a lot of that, right? But branding does. And they have been, he took care of business with the TV deal, right? And he didn't know all the things that were coming, like kind of the streaming bust that we're in now. We had a boom. There's a bit more busts. Companies are cutting back. They're not spending as much. But the Big 12, they got a deal when they should, but now it turns out to be the right time. And that worked because of Brett Yormark's, aggressiveness and forward thinking. And you're seeing the struggles of the Pac-12. You're seeing also, too, they got the deal done with Texas and OU. There was a number. They found it, got them out of there. Everybody can move on now. That's what everybody wanted, right? And that makes sense. Big 12 Mexico, I cannot tell you if it's going to work or not. But people are talking about it, and they're asking about it. And BYU's got a very large LDS community, and I think you'll see them down there eventually when they play football. Basketball, you're sending Houston and Kansas. So, I mean, if you want to talk about putting your best foot forward, Kansas is as about as good of a brand as you got in college hoops. And Houston's been a hammer in the last few years. Definitely. I mean, they have not been in the power conference, but I mean, anybody thinks that's not a power conference team after a lot of their tournament performances, I can't really help you. They're putting that best foot forward, and they're trying to find ways to change, like to just go about this differently. I think if any league were to put sponsors on a jersey, I think the Big 12 would be first to do it. Right. You think about that gap the Big 12 schools have, they're already at a financial gap to some of those big schools, but even now with the big television contracts that will kick in for the SEC and for the Big 10, I mean, ultimately closes if you're going to close the gap, you need great coaching, good player development, all of those things. But you need money. You need the student athlete experience to still be good enough to compete. And then the coaching and the player development kind of does the rest. And so they got to find ways to not bridge the gap, but make the gap as small as possible financially. And I think he is on the forefront of that. They're going to sell their data for gambling purposes and whatnot. And look, here's the thing: is not all of his ideas will work. The ads, I think, have been pretty honest about this is they are not on like eye to eye, which is good. Like they're like
Yeah.
they all want the same thing, but the way that they're going to get there is different, and that's what makes this thing work. Is that there's got to be a working relationship. I think Brett Yormark would love to add UConn. I bet there's a lot of people in the Big 12, the ads are like, no, right? Gonzaga, I'm sure he'd love to add them because he's thinking about, hey, what if we created this amazing A package of basketball that we sold? It's Houston, KU, and Gonzaga, and UConn and whatnot. And some of the ads are like, okay, well, if it doesn't financially really explode for us, and there's no guarantee, we're not sure we want to take that risk maybe and lose a little bit of money. And that makes sense. But I think that marriage is good. It could go wrong at some point, but I think it's good right now because the league knows it has to be forward thinking about ways to keep itself relevant. And he's that kind of guy. And I think him not being a college sports fan has actually benefited him a lot. He's got a group of people around him, and you can tell he is very, very thoughtful about who is around him. Mm-hmm. And he really leans on the ADs too. Mac Rhodes, especially at Baylor, he leans on to just as a sounding board for ideas and whatnot. So I think that's good that he's done a great job. And I'm not just saying as a Big 12 guy, hear the way Paul Feinbaum talks about, he's like, the Big 12 is on the rise. Brett Yormark's doing a great job. They've really been pushing the, hey, realignment stuff. You can tell they're leaking to the right people to keep that kind of public pressure up and whatnot. I think they're kind of pulling the right strings publicly. But once again, it does come down to performance. And I mean, he can't actually perform on the field with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's true. So, I told you a few months ago, I was talking about a spot that was played when he was making his opening remarks. And I'm not gonna go over the whole spot, but at the very end, like I said, I had to. I was on YouTube with my iPad. I hit the backup a little once or twice.
Right.
It said always greater than 12. That was a very interesting. Of course, with Texas and Oklahoma going out, you go back to 12. And as you just mentioned, they're not happy. It sounds like with just 12 teams.
Yeah, they're not. I think, here's the thing. They want to have a national conference that's mostly about TV, television windows and whatnot, from sea to shining sea and all that kind of stuff. But it is a conference based in Texas, right? 4 schools are in Texas. They'd like to be able to provide games in all television windows. They can do a little bit of that right now at BYU, obviously. That's going to allow them to have games later on. I think getting to California is a challenge because if you're not adding a school, it's a Power 5 school, the money-wise, it's just going to be tough to do, especially when you consider the travel costs for a San Diego State. Oh my God, the non-revenue sports, it's just going to cost an arm and a leg for them to do. They want to be in a power conference, but it's just not making enough sense for the Big 12 to do it at this point. So they want to expand. I think greater than 12. Yeah. It's a moniker, but I mean, he did say outright, we're more than just 2 teams, we are. And I think it's nice having TCU go to the CFP and win a game, right? And be like, there you go. It's not just about Texas and OU. So that was obviously good to have. I think they clearly have designs on expanding. The best part though was once again, him being the salesman. He's like, I love that spot so much. Let's play it again. Oh yeah. He wanted it was just okay, sure. And I think we all understand what he's doing. He has got to be a salesman now. But yeah, I the more than 12 thing, I think it would be odd to think they wouldn't want more than what they have right now. And I think there's strength in numbers if it's the right numbers, right? I mean, I think about this as somebody who covers the Big 12, the college football playoff and whatnot is expanding and stuff, but it's going to change rapidly fast. And are we heading towards pro soccer? Are we heading towards a Champions League where it's 60 teams are involved or 40 teams are involved, and we're just playing in a big super league? Is that where it's heading? Because at this point, financially, the gap is actually like that, right? And we're talking about $80 million a year for the Big 10 schools and 31 a year for the Big 12 schools. That's double, right? So it's double. So we're talking about that. It's kind of already there, but I think the larger the Big 12 gets with more meaningful brands, are you going to have a world of college football where TCU and Colorado and Arizona and Oklahoma State aren't involved when you know they're better than some of the programs who are involved. I think that's where my mind goes when I think about like what the future is. And I think having a larger voting block, if you will, like we just have more schools. Are you going to exclude all of these schools? I think there's actually something that's better to it. And then also the television part of it too. And it's weird because like, I know you probably feel like this too, but after covering the sport, the way I've had to cover it's changed because the business part of it's become more important than the on-field stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually how it's been with the fans too. I mean, my football stuff, it's great. I think it's good, but the conference realignment stuff always has better numbers. And that's kind of and there's a reason why, because the next move is going to define what college football and college sports look like moving forward. So I think, yeah, they have their eyes set. And I think it's just a matter of who it is. You got to be strategic, but they want to add more for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you and you're seeing it more in media now. There's more and more people covering that side of it, the business side of it, more and
Right.
more podcasts, articles.
Yeah, I mean Andrew Marchand and John Orand, they
Yeah.
have a sports media podcast which is exclusively covering sports media.
Yeah.
And that's something that we probably would have had 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's how things are covered with this is just so different than what it was maybe just a year or two ago.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the league going into the 2023 season and the
Yes.
media picks has Texas. So I
They're
guess
back.
yeah, there we go. There we go.
They're back.
I wish I had the Joe Tessitore audio. I would play that right now, or the million times we've heard Texas is back.
Sam Ellinger yelling, "We're back" with Holly Rowe. I think it was after, I forget which bowl game that was, but there's that one
Yeah,
too.
when they beat Georgia, even though they had like 4 losses that year, they
Right.
beat Georgia when we know probably Georgia, let's be honest, didn't care,
Didn't care.
as
Not wanna be
much.
there.
Yeah, didn't want to be there. They wanted to be in a playoff. They had a disappointing year. But in your opinion, should Texas be the favorite in the league?
Yes. Yeah, they should. And so there's a couple parts of this. Number one, they have the best roster, full stop. People say, well, they've had that before. Yeah, but like this one's talented in a different way. Look at Sark's recruiting classes. He put a very, very specific emphasis on the lines of scrimmage. I think we saw that a couple years ago too with the way that they're coaching the line of scrimmage. We saw that Bo Davis video, right? Yeah. I mean, they are very, very concerned about how they look at that front. And that's what defines it. I went to the Peach Bowl in 2019 and watched Oklahoma just get their asses whipped. Sorry, I'm not sure we can curse, but as there's another way to put it, against LSU, right? Mm-hmm. And it was like watching these guys, and I think Kenneth Murray was on that defensive line too. The guys ended up being NFL players. It was like them watching them, water hit a brick wall. The brick wall wasn't going anywhere. It was, the rain hit it and it just dissipated. I mean, that's what it was like, and the difference was massive up front. And so Texas has invested a lot up front. I think that their lines are good enough. I think their skill position players are on their receiving core is ridiculous. Quinn Ewers, I think it's pretty natural to think that he might, takes a step forward, but I'm not sure it needs to be a massive leap for them to be that good. Every game they lost at last year was a 1-score game, every single one. So like if we're talking about flipping games, it doesn't take a Herculean effort to flip some of those games. It just takes a bit more quality. And once a couple of those losses were not his fault, right? Think about the loss, Alabama, he was out of that game. Their loss against Texas Tech, he didn't play in that game either. The Oklahoma State game was his fault. He was terrible in that game. But like he's young, and he's going to get better. And I think it's the one thing to remember is like this guy has not started a lot. I think 1 full year as a starter, I think it doesn't done him a lot of good. And I actually think that they're good with like Malik Murphy either. I think whoever they play, it's really hard to mess this up on offense. And then on defense, they've returned guys at all 3 levels. They do miss some dudes, but I mean, Jalen Ford's one of the best defensive players in the conference. They've got a pretty good secondary, and they can create some pressure. They were very good at creating pressure last year. Didn't sack a lot of times, but they created a lot of pressure. So I think they are in the right spot right now compared to the rest of the league. And once again, this league has had a lot of turnover. So if you look and say, all right, who makes sense now? We've had 6 different teams in the last 3 Big 12 championship games. It would make a lot of sense that it's Texas' time, 5-7, 8-5. The next step up seems to be, 10-2 and in a Big 12 title game.
And of course, this is not a conference game. In the future, it will be. After this year, it will be.
Yes.
That second game
at
Alabama. So that's going to get a lot of play. And I think right now, I wouldn't be shocked if Texas beat Alabama. Just
I was thinking about this. So, the quarterback thing is kind of scary, right? It's like, is it going to be Tyler Buchner? Like, is that who it's going to be?
I would not think he would transfer it and not think it. I mean, I don't know Saban's not going to
Right.
guarantee anything, and then Tommy Reese being there. And be honest with you, Josh, I'm not too enamored with the Alabama wide receivers because last year Bryce Young had to play Superman all the time, and these
Oh,
guys were not getting open like what they were used to at Alabama. So quarterback's fine if you have a good quarterback, that's great, but the receivers aren't getting open. None of these guys are Bryce Young that they have on their roster. So that's I look at that and I'm like, okay, if Texas wins that, or even if it's just another really close game, but Quinn Ewers plays the whole
I think
game,
it might be a bad thing if they win that game, though. You know
really,
what I mean? Oh, the hype would just be nuclear.
yeah,
Could
that's
you
true.
imagine they win that game at, in Bryant Denny? I think it almost might work. You know, I think a close loss like might be the best spot. I think it's weird to say like you want to win every game, but the the Texas is back thing because here's the problem. There are a couple Big 12 teams that have their number. Because and if they win that game, there's gonna be a whole lot of being like, oh yes, oh like TC is gonna be like, yep, Texas Tech, and then that game's later in the year too. Like a bunch of these schools that have kind of had their number are gonna be like, yes, give us highly ranked Texas, please. And we're gonna give one more, kick in the butt and the way out the door. So I know it's a weird way to look at it, but like I think you mentioned it, it's a non-con game, so maybe we can lose that one. The 28-24. A lot of promise, in that game. Hey, tough road loss. One where everybody's like, we feel pretty good about Texas coming out of it. I feel like that might be best case scenario because they win that game. Oh my God, it's gonna be the hype train's gonna be unbearable.
Yeah, that is true. That is true, especially like I said, going into Bryant Denny because they don't lose a lot. Alabama doesn't
No,
lose a lot
no,
there. Talk about the two teams that played in the Big 12 championship game last year, Kansas State and TCU. I know a lot
yeah,
of people are going to look at TCU. Oh, you lost your offensive coordinator, you lost Max Duggan, you lost Quentin Johnson, receiver, all these guys, but they did a good job at replacing some guys through the portal. And of course, Kansas State, they've got 13 starters coming back. They've got the quarterback coming back, and Will Howard played really well the last 7 games. What are your thoughts on these two teams? And maybe they be, because hey, if Texas gets the Big 12 championship game, they got to play somebody. What are your thoughts on
right.
these two teams?
Yeah, so I'll go to Kansas State first, right? We'll give them the attention because they were the winner last year. The thing for them is Will Howard, uh, everybody to a man, assistants, his teammates, his coaches, himself said the game slowed down for him. I think we forget this sometimes, like they are kids, and sometimes it's too fast, and then they just get old. Like he just got older and got better. And you watch him last year. I mean, he was saved the Alabama game. I mean, complete, and then he got hurt against TCU. Like complete command of the offense. Complete command of the offense. Big kid, strong kid. He distributed the ball really well too. I think it's one thing Colin Klein definitely impressed upon. It's like, hey man, we're gonna spread this ball around. We're gonna get this ball all over the place. They use tight ends, wide receivers, backs. That you have to defend the entire field against K-State. Do they have a Deuce Vaughn? No, but I think they've actually got a potentially, if this thing goes well for Will Howard, man, like I see him in person. He's big and he's big, white, and he can throw the ball pretty far. And there's a few guys who have gotten some nice checks based off of those qualities. I can't say he's gonna be a good NFL quarterback, but there's a lot of guys who have made a decent amount of money because they look the part, right, as they
Yeah.
say. And he's got a good chance at that. I think their defense is good, and I'm not sure it's gonna be as good as it was last year. I'm a little bit worried about the back end. And I'm also worried about how they're going to generate pressure because they're going to miss Felix Anudike-Uzomah and the attention that he got up front. But I think they've done a really good job. Their wide receiver core is very strong. They could be picked off by a few teams, but also too, like they were 9-3 last year. But really, if they made the switch from Martinez to Howard full time, like they probably would have been a bit earlier. They probably would have been a bit better. I don't know why Martinez played in that game against Texas. I'll never understand that. The Tulane loss. Tulane was good, but it was just a weird game. So I think they're right in position. And TCU, it's funny. I mentioned this in my show the other day. They were really not mentioned, like in kind of the general buzz. Sonny Dykes didn't, and that team. I think this is just an expectation. They take a step back, but I love the league. It's a lot of fun. If the Big 12 is going to try to get anywhere near an SEC or whatever, like they need their version of Clemson. I think TCU's got a great shot because of where they're located, because of the potential financial resources they have just in terms of being a private school. Like they can, getting money to certain places can be a bit easier in institutions like that. They don't have the alumni reach, which can be difficult, but they traded out, Garrett Riley for Kendall Briles. They took him from an SEC school, and like Kendall Briles is a, very good quarterback. If of Arkansas, they wanted to retain him. Like that,
Mhm.
I think they wanted to retain Kendall Briles. I mean, you're getting him back with KJ Jefferson after a monster year, and he goes and takes TCU job. And I don't know how good Chandler Morris will be. They brought in Chance Nolan, but they've still got like a lot of pieces. Their defense is really good. Like their defense was very good at adjusting in game last year. They got punched in the mouth early and then would bow up late. It was kind of their story. They got playmakers all over the defense, and a lot of those guys are actually back. So I think they've got a chance. Like if you were to tell me that second tier teams who I would give the best chance to kind of make that run, I'd say talent wise, it would be them, and then Baylor's the other one, just because like I believe in Dave Aranda is the other one. So I'm very curious about TCU this year because I've got no idea how it's going to go. But the Big 12 needs a TCU to step up and go back. Like they need a repeat offender, for lack of a better term. They need somebody to kind of start winning more because cycling is not going to get them college ball playoff wins. It feels like at this point.
Oh, and actually, you answered. I had like two more questions for you, and that Baylor was kind of like I was asking, what's another team maybe could rise up that we're not maybe talking about, and there you go. You answered that question for me on that one. So my last question, Oklahoma, obviously did not go well with Brent Venables. I think a lot of people look at Lincoln Riley. It was winning. Yeah, over half his team went to Los Angeles, so
Right.
that was the big thing. What is your outlook? How do you see Oklahoma? Will they turn it around this year? Will Brett Venables kind of have this thing going in the right direction as they head out of the conference?
Good news, the schedule is easy, we think. I like getting Dylan Gabriel back. I think he's pretty good. I was talking to Eli Letterman from the Oklahoman last week, and I was asking him about this. I know Brent Venables is a defensive guy, and they had to weed out a lot of the roster. That was appalling last year. Their defense was like appalling. And I hope he's learned, that Texas game on the offensive side of things, they had no backup plan. Like they had a week to prepare for that game, and their plan at quarterback was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're thinking like, man, I mean, how does that happen? Now you see a really awesome and kind of inspired bowl effort that I really liked, but they're losing some pretty impressive playmakers too. And look, they're recruiting at a level and getting guys in a level that can replace it automatically. But I just could not pick them in the Big 12 championship game because after that performance last year, I think the defense will get better. I think it's pretty safe to say. But like if their offense is the same and their defense is incrementally better, that does not get them into a Big 12 championship game. They need to be much, much better than they were last year to get to a Big 12 championship game. I mean, TCU beat the brakes off of them last year. Texas beat the brakes off of them last year. The Baylor game was close, but Baylor ran it right down their throats last year. Texas Tech moved the ball at will on them last year. Kansas moved the ball at will on them last year. They were able to score on them pretty easily, but like there are these games. I mean, Adrian Martinez, my God, last year against them. All these performances, right? And it's just so concerning. And I think I know you can get stuff turned around faster now, but I have a tough time believing it's going to get that much better that quickly. And that's why I'm not very high on OU this year. The league's down, their schedule's easy, so I guess I'll be in conversation, but like, I don't think they're better than Kansas State. I definitely don't think they're better than Texas. Are they better than Texas Tech? Like, yeah, I mean, talent wise, maybe, but Texas Tech still being pretty good, So I think I need to see more proof. And look, I might be wrong at the end of the year, but I just can't put my faith in that group right now after what we saw last year. Like, I'm not sure why that group should have any confidence they're going to get the job done this year. But we've seen teams go from crappy to Big 12 title game before too, right? Like 2020 Baylor and then 2021 Baylor, a completely different story. So that happens in this league a lot.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I guess with them, it's just have to wait and see how they look.
Right.
They're on the field product. It's kind of hard to look on paper. So you should, but we'll see after what last year. So Josh, I told you off the air we would go 15-20. We are looking at 35
That's my
minutes.
fault. That's my fault.
It's okay. It's okay. It's been great conversation. So hey, great thing about podcasts, this. We're not on the radio, so kind of go how long.
There's nobody giving you the wrap up or the clock on that. No, it's great.
Yeah, always. But I appreciate you coming on the show. But if the listeners and viewers want to check you out, where can they find you and all the stuff you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm with the 365 Sports Network. You guys can find my work. Crystal Ball College Football is the channel. Neighborhood Watch is the show. Please subscribe to that channel and also like the videos. Leave. I love always hear the comments too. So leave those. You guys can find me on Twitter at Josh Neighbors _, and you guys can find the show at NW Pod 365. And we're also available wherever you get your podcasts. 5+ days a week of Big 12 coverage. We also cover national stuff as well. We talked about Big 12 media days and SEC media days, both in Dallas, and what that kind of means for both leagues. So we touched on that. So there is some SEC crossover there for the folks who are jonesing for some more SEC content.
Yes, my in-state brethren, go over there.
There you go.
Go check out the neighborhood watch. Hey, and anyways, you get to hear about Gus Malzahn. I know that's something people in the state want to hear about too as well. What's going on with Gus? But anyways, Josh, I appreciate the time, and I hope we can do this again sometime down the road.
Anytime, my friend. Thank you so much.